It's a great day for reading and having a wicked good time. Hello and welcome to Checked Out. We're broadcasting from Euclid Public Library in beautiful Euclid, Ohio. I'm Jean Robinson, Multimedia and Communications Specialist.
And I'm Mike Stein, Assistant Manager of Adult Services. We talk about our favorite books, movies, services, and events with our favorite people and our favorite community. Each podcast will feature a theme. Today we're talking about Cleveland's Wicked Witch of the West, Margaret Hamilton. And our guest is Don Billie, author of the book Margaret Hamilton, From Cleveland, Ohio to the Land of Oz. He's also been a computer analyst, a social worker, Red Cross hurricane relief worker, and Middle East refugee camp worker. Don started his writing career at Cleveland State University's newspaper. He has previously written about Freddy Krueger's Cleveland's Origin for Cleveland Magazine. He is also the author of Hey You Punks, a book that vividly depicts his experiences growing up on Cleveland's gritty near west side. Don, welcome to Checked Out.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to talk about Margaret Hamilton.
Well, let's get right into it, Don. What inspired you to write about Margaret Hamilton? Did your own background as a Cleveland author influence your interest in Hamilton and the way you approached your story?
As a local Cleveland history buff and Cleveland author, working on another historical project a couple decades ago, I had gathered a lot of information about Margaret and quite a few other Cleveland celebrities and historical figures. And at some point, I had gathered so much information, I considered writing a book. And when I looked up, I realized that no one had ever written a book about Margaret Hamilton, which was, to me, probably the most surprising thing, because it seems most celebrities have, if not one, multiple books about her. So that was very surprising to me. I had gotten a lot of information from various sources that she was connected with in the past in her Cleveland years. So, without even thinking about it, all of a sudden, here I was, ready to write this book about Margaret. And I had tons of information that I almost didn't realize I had accumulated.
Now, from what I understand, she had a passion for acting since she was in children's theater and began her acting career at the Cleveland Playhouse, ironically, as the first witch in Macbeth. But she also spent time as a school teacher in Huff on the east side of Cleveland. How did that happen?
Well, it's an interesting path like many of us take. When she was a senior at Hathaway Brown High School here in Cleveland, she had the acting bug already, as you mentioned. So she appeared in the senior play, and she got the accolades and loved it and everything. And up to that point, her parents, being sensible Midwestern folks, the plan all along was for her to become a kindergarten teacher. After her senior play, she, kind of went to them and said, hey, I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm just going to become an actress. And, well, guess what happened? She was overruled, you might say. And so they said, you can do some of that, stuff later on. But right now it's, you got to take care of business. And she ended up attending Wheelock Kindergarten Training School in the Boston area and becoming a kindergarten teacher. Eventually, she came back here and she did teach at Huff Elementary. And while she was doing that, she still, tried to get, involved in acting here and there. And ultimately, she went to become part-time as a nursery school teacher. And she applied for and was with the Cleveland Playhouse internship program. So in the late 1920s, she had a very nice 3-year internship with the Cleveland Playhouse, including, as you mentioned, the coincidence that she did play a witch in Macbeth, not knowing, how that would one day be associated with her forever.
And we're here with Don Billie, the author of the book Margaret Hamilton, From Cleveland, Ohio to the Land of Oz. I suppose we shouldn't just assume everybody knows who she is right off the bat. Margaret Hamilton, of course, played the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, a very famous role. I remember I'm melting, that really got me when I was a kid, kind of scared me. but she started off in Cleveland as a teacher. So how long was she a teacher, and when did she decide to go exclusively to acting?
She was between being a kindergarten teacher and then a nursery school teacher, was just from the mid 20s towards the end of the decade. As she finished her successful, highly acclaimed Cleveland Playhouse internship, she was ready to take the world by storm, as most actors are after some, successes. And then, unfortunately, a very major problem interfered with that, namely the Depression of 1929. So when her acting goals, to go to Broadway and continue acting in the theater, coming out as an unknown Cleveland actress, right as the Depression hit, obviously the opportunities were few and far between. So sadly, that kind of got kiboshed. So she kind of came back to Cleveland, and one good thing that did occur right at around that time was she was married shortly after that in the early 1930s. And her husband at the time, knowing that she had done some summer stock, encouraged her to try to continue and do some summer stock to try and get back into the acting field. And so she did end up doing that. If you want me to talk about it a little.
Sure. Yeah.
So she did summer stock in the early 1930s. And then just as the summer was winding down, things were looking a little grim. She was getting ready to become, a kindergarten teacher again towards the end of the summer. And then the final summer stock show that she was doing, Hallam Wives, it was picked up coincidentally to go to Broadway. So the play went to Broadway, was renamed Another Language, and then it became the hit Surprise on Broadway. And then right after that, because it was a success, it ended up becoming a movie right after that too. So that was her pathway into both Broadway and her movie career, where she started out as being a character actress, primarily maids and town gossips and busybodies and things like that. But things just kind of, the dominoes started going. So that was her big break. It just looked like, she wasn't even going to be an actress. And then, you hear so many stories like that in the Hearts where things are looking kind of grim. And then all of a sudden, something happens. In her case, she got her big break right as she was ready to become a kindergarten teacher again.
And just like that, a star was born. I love old movies, and I've seen many of her non-witch appearances. I did notice that they were mostly character roles. Did she like doing those types of roles? And what movie did she enjoy being in the most?
Well, she was very practical. One thing is, so right after she had gotten married and started her career, sadly, her marriage didn't last long, and she had a young son. So as her Hollywood character actress career was taking off, she said the most challenging role of her career was that of being a single mom in Hollywood. Divorce just wasn't a popular thing a century ago or whatever. So she was being very practical in that she wanted to keep taking these character actress roles to stay employed. So that was, probably her biggest goal was with a young child to do that. She didn't necessarily say she had a favorite movie. She just enjoyed playing the various roles, crossing paths with many people like Clark Gable and Katharine Hepburn, Henry Fonda. She was in movies like with James Cagney, Lucille Ball. So it was, very, very good. And then, like I said, that kind of led up to this movie we all heard of, The Wizard of Oz.
So we have Billie here, author of Margaret Hamilton, From Cleveland, Ohio to the Land of Oz, made famous in the Wizard of Oz movie as Wicked Witch of the West. So if you want to hear more from Don, he's going to be at a couple events coming up soon on October 18th at 2 p.m. at New Life at Calvary Church on East 79th Street in Cleveland. And then October 25th, 1 p.m. at Cleveland Public Library's Rockport branch on Puritas Avenue. So yeah, let's get into the Wizard of Oz. How did she get cast for that role? How did she do what she did? Was that what she was hired to do? Did she like create the character on her own, or how did all that work?
So it was interesting in that the Wonderful Wizard of Oz had been a popular children's book for a few decades, leading up to the movie, and it was coincidentally Margaret's favorite book as a child. Also, her mother used to read it to her, and so they finally decided to make the Wizard of Oz into a movie in the towards the end of the 1930s. And at that time, Snow White was very popular. So the initial goal was to have a beautiful witch, similar to the one in Snow White. So Margaret wasn't actually the first choice for the Wicked Witch. Many people didn't realize that. A new director came in and they wanted to go back more towards the book. So they wanted, I'll say, a less beautiful witch. So she was contacted by her agent, and she wasn't sure whether to take that as a compliment or an insult. Um, and she tried out for the part, and she did various screen tests as a less glamorous one, and as we know, she got the role. Um, so it was, like I said, a blessing, in disguise. Once again, she would make jokes over the years about her looks or whatever, but so that's how she actually got the role as the Wicked Witch. And another coincidence was right before that, when she was doing some local community theater, she played a witch a second time in Los Angeles with the Junior League of Los Angeles. So she played a witch twice before The Wizard of Oz. So once again, just another interesting coincidence in her career.
It seems like she was destined to be a witch, considering her background and everything. But being a witch in The Wizard of Oz wasn't an easy walk down the yellow brick road. Some of the actors had physical problems during the filming, like the first actor chosen to play the Tin Man. He had a severe reaction to the silver makeup and had to drop out. In your book, you mentioned a serious accident Margaret Hamilton experienced during the filming.
Yeah, unfortunately, Margaret had a history of bad coincidences with fire. Um, and as she was doing the famous scene where she's in Munchkin Land threatening Dorothy and Toto, and then she disappears behind the flame and the big cloud of red smoke or whatever. Uh, she goes down this really quick kind of hidden elevator, and they filmed it the first time and it was worked out great. And like most movies, they always do scenes typically 2 3 times just in case something went wrong. So when they did the scene later on, and she was the flames come up as she was quickly descending kind of secretly there, the person hit the flame button a little too quick, and she received major burns on her face and hands, and she was bedridden there for a while, and she was off the set for like 6 weeks. So that was terrible. When she came back, they wanted to do another stunt, the one where the witch flies out of the witch's castle on the broom there. She's like, no, no more stunts. I'm not doing it. So they had her backup stunt person do that scene, and lo and behold, there was an explosion, and her stunt person got severely injured also. So that was terrible. And then years earlier, when she was still a resident of Cleveland and they went on vacation, her and her family escaped a hotel blaze where 10 people were killed by flames. So she just seemed to have this bad coincidence with some natural disasters. So yeah, luckily she finished some of the parts in the movie, and like I said, things ultimately did work out well. One minor story to that was a number of people who were friends said, "Oh, you should sue the studio," but she knew as a relatively new unknown character actress that she would be blackballed from Hollywood. So she chose not to do that. and she was able to continue her career as a character actress.
Now, I've seen the movie probably a dozen times when I was a kid. It was on every year. Now you can see it on demand, DVD, or whatever. It's become a classic film, probably one of the top 10 most famous movies ever. What was Cleveland's reaction? Did they know, oh, we've got a Clevelander in this? Was it like Star Wars level event when it was being filmed?
It was a popular movie, but it wasn't a blockbuster. Um, and as far as the reviews, ironically, one of the lesser reviews was from one of the writers in one of the local Cleveland newspapers. So overall, she got good reviews, but one of the lesser ones was from her hometown newspaper. Um, but the movie itself, like I said, it did well. It was a popular movie, but it wasn't until it became the annual event on television in the late 1950s where it became this big, thing with families, and they would really build it up in the press and the media. And it continued that way for a few decades until cable TV came around, as you mentioned. Then it was on, fairly often after that. But, for a few decades there, starting in the late 50s, The Wizard of Oz was this major happening each year. And just the publicity leading up to that one showing per year really helped bring it into the next, level of popularity. And then, like I said, it just has maintained its popularity over the years. So it was, like I said, just a wonderful thing for her, although she didn't actually make that much money off it, as well as some of her other actors in that movie. So people assume because it's so popular, a lot of times she just make money, a lot of money off of it, and sadly, not so. So it did help her career, but not mega wise financially.
But it did become the role she's most known for. Being in an iconic role like the Wicked Witch could be a blessing and a curse. Did she have a problem with being typecast afterwards?
She didn't mind it, but inevitably, if she was on TV, because she still loved doing the theater, and then as TV became a thing, and she was a character actress with bit parts in the movies, whatever she was, if she was on Broadway for some play, they'd be talking about the Broadway play, but inevitably, yes, it would always go back to the Wizard of Oz. And in a few interviews, they would always try and coax her into doing the witch cackle. And her coworker, um, fellow actress Judy Garland, when she was the guest host on the Merv Griffin show, she was able to get Margaret on there, and Margaret was appearing in a Broadway play, talked about that. But then, of course, Judy, they had to talk about the Wizard of Oz. And then she got Margaret to do the witch cackle, much to the delight of the crowd, of course. So that was the highlight there. But it's like I said, she didn't really mind. Like I said, some actors, you hear the story of they don't like being stereotyped or typecast. And so she didn't mind, kept her steadily employed. And like I said, she was steadily employed for throughout her career. It's just she never really had any major blockbuster movies or TV shows, but quite a few where she was seen, and she always would, on occasion, even dress up as the Wicked Witch, or they'd try to get her in as a witch. So there were several movies where she was a witch.
I'm sure after watching the movie plenty of times as a kid, I would have thought that if I ever met Margaret Hamilton, there she is, the actual Wicked Witch. She's that person. That's how she is. Has your book cleared up how people perceived her, that she wasn't anything like that Wicked Witch character? What were some of the myths surrounding her that you wrote about in your book?
Well, the irony, as you mentioned, is she was indeed one of the kindest, gentlest people you would ever meet. Um, and she often would make jokes about that. There were a few quotes where she mentioned that it was always so ironic that she realized she probably scared more children than anybody, and yet she loved children so much, especially being a former teacher. And she was so diligent where when she would appear at events over the years, she was always, signing autographs, posing with pictures. Um, she literally wrote back to every child who ever wrote her a fan mail. And I was able to talk with many of the children who are around my age now, where they got their cherished letter from Margaret Hamilton. And oftentimes she would even sign an autographed photo of herself without them even really asking for it. So she was just the kindest person. Um, she was always, willing to talk to, the young kids at these different events. It was just the stories of her kindness were almost legendary. So it was quite ironic. And the other thing with her career, I mentioned, not making the most money from The Wizard of Oz was the role where she did make the most money. She appeared for years in the 1970s in these Maxwell House coffee commercials as Cora, this like small New England shopkeeper, grandmotherly person. And when the commercials first came on, I know a lot of people seeing this, kindly shopkeeper, they're like, that's the Wicked Witch, and it was quite surprising to a lot of people that, yes, that was her, the kinder, older, gentler version of it. But yeah, but she made, like I said, quite a nice amount of money over the years with the commercials. I guess anytime you're doing them for several years, but so yeah, she was always happy with that role. But yeah, definitely different than the witch role. And she was over, like I said, a few interviews trying to dispel, the scariness of the witch. She appeared on Mr. Rogers' show, um, where she was, showing that it was really just make believe, and she was, showing how she was just a person versus the witch, and it was make believe and things like that. So that was one of the ones where she, really went out of her way to try and dispel some of the witch scariness.
I remember those old Maxwell House commercials. Yeah, it was a totally different side to her. I also remember her being a guest character on the old Addams Family TV series.
She was Grandma Frump. She was in 3 episodes on the Addams Family, and there was actually one episode entitled "Happy Birthday, Grandma Frump." Um, and like I said, she fit right in with the Addams Family. But so many of the other TV shows that she was on, like The Partridge Family and a few of the others, it was usually like one episode. You have to blink, and she was there. The Patty Duke Show, and a few others, and then with a lot of the movies too, she would pop in here or there. One of the ones where she got to play this witch type character was the original 13 Ghosts, where she's a maid, and towards the end of the movie, the young kid in the movie's like, he's like, "You really are a witch, aren't you?" And she's, "Ask me no questions, and I'll tell you no lies." And then she kind of walks away, and she, they show her standing next to like a broom, kind of reminiscent. So a couple of these directors here and there, they, did a little shout out. And then probably the most bizarre witch one was she appeared on this Sesame Street episode where she played, it was pretty much like the Wicked Witch, and she was kind of a scary, witchy character, and it scared the kids so much. Parents complained, and the episode was banned for
Oh
decades.
no.
It was seen one, it was a one and done episode, and then just in the last few years, a couple people have like unearthed it somewhere from PBS, and they're showing it. When you watch it, you're still kind of scratching your head, wondering like, what were they actually trying to teach these young kids to be terrified? But yeah, it's like I said, there were a number of portrayals of a witch here and there. And like I said, that was definitely a bizarre one. A more recent one, right towards the end, it was her last movie, was the kind of breakout role for Christopher Walken and Sean Connery. But once again, she was in there just very briefly as a character actress. Um, and then, ironically, her last made for TV role, she played a teacher.
Yeah,
So,
there
so
you go, full
yeah,
circle.
yeah. And she wasn't that nice of a teacher, I'll say. It was somewhere between Cora from Maxwell House and the Wicked Witch. So,
Don, I understand you were in London recently and saw the musical Wicked. What'd you think of that? And did you just start comparing the witches?
so Wicked was awesome. And like I said, it is so different. Wicked, the musical, and the movie are very similar. based on the Gregory Maguire novel, which, like I said, is definitely different than the Wonderful Wizard of Oz and the original movie. But they're all, great in their own way. Gregory Maguire, as the author, he was inspired by Margaret Hamilton and the Wizard of Oz, and he joked around in a couple of his interviews that as he was writing Wicked, the novel, 30 some years ago, that he was drinking many cups of Maxwell House coffee, channeling Cora. That was fun, but it is interesting to see how everything is kind of tied together, and a lot of the actresses have paid homage to Margaret here and there, so it's all good.
What do you hope people will remember about her legacy after they finish reading your book?
Well, several things is just her overall kindness, I think. Just trying to, be a good person. She always also had a kind spot in her heart for her hometown of Cleveland, returned here many times over the years, was in a few Cleveland Playhouse productions towards the end. She appeared with the Cleveland Orchestra, visit where she attended school, Hathaway Brown, usually when she was in town. So it was just her, message of trying to, be a good, kind person, pay it forward. Some of these kids who were, youngsters, I've met at a couple of my Margaret Hamilton presentations, and they were just kind of gushing how kind and wonderful she was. So that was her persona, was just, that of being such a good, humanitarian and role model for everybody, which is, like I said, so crazy when you think of it compared to what she's known for.
And we're very excited to have Don Billie here with us today, author of the book Margaret Hamilton, From Cleveland, Ohio to the Land of Oz. And you can meet Don at New Life at Calvary Church on October 18th at 2 p.m. on East 79th Street in Cleveland, and also at Cleveland Public Library's Rockport branch on Puritas Avenue on October 25th at 1 p.m. Books will be available there. Is there anything else you want to add, Don?
So once again, thank you for your support. It's available on Amazon.com, and then several of the local Northeast Ohio bookstores also have it in stock, or they can order it for you. And like I said, it's just been a wonderful opportunity to talk about such a nice person, as well as, we always like to say, Cleveland's own. And I just wish, more people would get to know that she is indeed here from Cleveland. As I joked at a couple of my presentations, since there's so little to realize she was here, it's almost like she melted away from Cleveland. The home she grew up in, they're no longer there. The original schools she went to, the newer versions of the schools are there, but not the actual ones she attended. Huff Elementary, where she taught, that was ironically burned down. There's another coincidence with the fire. And right down the street from there, some great Cleveland trivia on Huff Avenue is a few blocks away, literally, where a young Wes Craven, who created Freddy Krueger, attended church. So within a few blocks of each other, you have the Wicked Witch and Freddy Krueger, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
Wow.
They're both from Cleveland. So very unique Cleveland. So.
It kind of came after her time, but I bet she would have been very popular at the Comic-Cons they have these days, where you get all these actors, iconic characters, and they sign autographs and just visit with them. She probably would have been a hit at those.
Oh, they would have loved her there. Like I said, right towards the end of her life, she did appear in several Wizard of Oz conventions. She was the guest of honor or whatever, and she was more than happy to be there and, talk with all the kids especially. So it was a great story.
The title of Don Billie's book is Margaret Hamilton, From Cleveland, Ohio to the Land of Oz. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you once again for having me.
Thanks, Don.
If you would like to watch Margaret Hamilton's story, make plans to attend the Friends of Euclid Public Library's lunch event on Thursday, October 23rd at noon, featuring an actress from Women in History who will present a live reenactment of Margaret Hamilton's life. This event will take place at Collision Bend in Euclid. You can purchase tickets now at EPL at 185th and online. Details are on our website.
Now it's time for the library news you cannot use.
Remember, if you try to repeat this news in any other format other than this podcast, it results in a major failure. Gene, perhaps we have a candidate for our next episode of Checked Out. According to Cleveland News Channel 5, Christina Getros, the teen librarian at Stowe Monroe Falls Public Library, has collected the library cards from 189 Ohio public libraries. That's not the story, though. Getros plans on visiting and collecting cards from all 251 of Ohio's public libraries. Before she's done, she started 20 years ago and really ramped up during the 2020 pandemic, telling the station that she made it her official hobby. Some of Getros' cards are on display at her library. Others she keeps in a binder similar to those I use to collect baseball cards. My library cards wouldn't even fill one page of that binder.
Here's one person who got a lot of use out of his library card. Imagine if Don Peltzer of Columbus visited all of Ohio's libraries. How many more books could he have read? As it stands, the 92-year-old kept a list of all 3,599 books he had read from 1962. His daughter Marcy asked her godson to publish that list on the website whatdanread.com after he died in July. According to the New York Times, Marcy wanted to pass out Dan's reading list to guests at his funeral, but a printout would have surpassed 100 pages. The site features an upload of Dan's handwritten reading notes, which lists the dates he finished each book. The Blue Nile by Alan Moorhead was the first book he read. Charles Dickens' David Copperfield was the last. According to his notes, Ulysses by James Joyce was the worst. And you can check out most of the books on Dan's list through Euclid Public Library.
Thanks for listening to Checked Out. You can learn more about Euclid Public Library by going to our website, euclidlibrary.org.